Hello and welcome, connoisseurs of fine common cardboard, to today's live stream and to this Let's Build. Today, sharing with you about Dalek Squadron from the Doctor Who set. And today I'm going to teach you a little bit about how to break Myriad in cPDH Competitive Pauper Commander. Welcome, everybody. Hope you're having a great day out there. We're going to do a quick shifting of the presentation mode here. Take this into full screen. There we go. Awesome. Cool. Well, everybody let me know if the audio is coming through loud and clear. But we're going to get started here. You guys can leave your questions in the live stream chat, and we'll get to them as they become relevant and as we enter the end of the presentation. So, Dalek Squadron was released along with the Doctor Who set, and immediately brought some interest on my part and some other folks, and have been working on it since. So let's talk a little bit about Dalek Squadron and what we see on the card. So the first thing we're going to notice is that it's 3 mana, and this sets us up to do some pretty aggressive gameplay. Obviously, if it were less, that'd be great. Good to see a Dax. But at 3 mana, this opens up some really awesome opportunities for turn 1 as well as turn 2 plays. In this deck, we are playing Dark Ritual, Cabal Ritual, and Lotus Petal. We could be playing Blood Pet as well, but I've opted instead to go for an Arcane Signet and a Felwar Stone just to get us up on mana into the perpetuity of the game. The other thing we're going to notice about Dalek is that it's actually quite aggressive. We've got Menace and Myriad. Menace, of course, being that we can only be blocked by two creatures at once, and the Myriad meaning that we are attacking every other player each turn. Now, this can lead to some really complex turn cycles where you're trying to figure out where to send your original card, the original Dalek. But this means we can pressure the entire table all at once, dealing damage to everybody. And in some ways, this is comparable to something along the lines of Loyal Subordinate. However, Loyal Subordinate, technically, it's a 3 mana, 3/1 with haste, maybe a 3/2. And basically, every time you go to combat, you drain the table for 3. And that's unblockable. It happens right when you go to combat. And part of the difference between this deck and that one is that this one grinds really, really well. The performance that I've put up with this one recently, obviously this is not predictive, but I've played 3 games with it. I've won 2, lost 1, and every game I felt like I was doing something super meaningful. And I think part of that is because Dalek isn't applying as much pressure as Loyal Subordinate, so it's not as likely to get blown out. Loyal Subordinate, when it comes down on turn 1, before anybody has any interaction, is going to deal an enormous amount of damage to the table. Turn 1, everybody takes 9. That's 10% of the deck's life total, or the table's life total right then and there. When you go to your next turn, another 10%, and you're going to hit somebody for 3. So on turn 2, in that deck, you can technically deal like 23% of the table's life total right off the bat. With Dalek, we're actually using that fast mana to set up a lot of other interactions that really help us leverage the best cards in black. Loyal Subordinate is just a good card, but if you do get killed, if Loyal Subordinate dies, and you've played it off of a Dark Ritual, it's going to be a long time before you replay it again because a lot of the Loyal Subordinate decks are built to go super fast. So Dalek is kind of like, it's still pretty damn aggressive. If you get this down on turn 1 with the Dark Ritual or turn 2 with our fast mana, you're going to be clocking people for a fairly solid amount of damage early on, and we're going to be able to get underneath the blockers. But the Myriad allows us to do a lot of other things too. And so the way we're going to leverage that Myriad and the fact that we're hitting everyone all at once is we're going to play a lot of cards that drain the table symmetrically. Cards like Okiba Reckoner Raid, Serrated Scorpion, Vermin Gorger, and Basilica Screecher. All creatures that are going to allow us to push damage onto everybody at once while we attack whoever is the biggest threat. We have a whole bunch of other cards that do the same thing. We have cards like Nocturnal Feeder, Vampire Spawn, Arrogant Outlaw, and Etched Familiar, which all do this either on ETB or on death. Either way, we ultimately have control over when we push this damage, either by sweeping our own board or by sacrificing these to our draw effects. And these are really powerful. A lot of people, I think, have thought that really it's only red that has pingers. And if we think of pinging as damage, then that's true. They're the only ones that work with Tandem Lookout and Ophidian Eye, allowing you to draw a ton of cards every time you cast a spell or get an ETB of an artifact or a creature or something along those lines. However, all of those cards require you to do something else to actually generate the damage. So while they're very efficient, they're nowhere near as efficient as these cards. Black pings like crazy. You play a Vampire Spawn. If you just resolve this card, you did 6 damage to the table and you gained 2 life. And that is an 8-point life swing. It's an 8-point life swing for 3 mana on a 2/3 creature that can attack and block. And all these other creatures do basically the same thing. If they ever get damage in, like if they're able to attack and hit somebody, the efficiency of these cards is well above what things like the Philosophy of Fire, the old document, I think it was Patrick Chapin wrote about, where you're looking at mana cost for damage. And, you know, pound for pound, these cards hit like a truck. And I've been really, really happy about how the life gain also serves to insulate my own life total in a really positive way, setting me even above 30 life in some cases. But there are other things that we can leverage as well. Nadir's Nightblade and Mirkwood Bats have stirred up a lot of interest in black decks, whether it's primarily through Abdel. I think Abdel and Sivris, Cloakwood Hermit, we've seen a lot of interest in these cards. There's even combo stuff you can do with Mirkwood Bats and certain, you know, blue-black Sphinx Summoner lines. But ultimately, these cards repeatedly achieve what all of those other pingers do as well. Nadir's Nightblade, every time your Myriad tokens leave, you're going to drain everybody for 2. Not only are you gaining life, but you're draining it as well. With Mirkwood Bats, every time we create them, we're going to drain everybody for 1 each. So each one of these is essentially like hitting for a lot of damage. Nadir's Nightblade basically has haste, right? It's resolving. We attack, Myriad tokens leave, we immediately drain for 2. It's kind of like Nadir's Nightblade is a 6-power creature with lifelink. And we're going to do that every single turn cycle. Mirkwood Bats has the benefit of also being able to attack, and we can ostensibly get more triggers with Mirkwood Bats because we create the tokens, and then if we do anything to sacrifice the tokens, we're also going to get triggers on that as well. So the next thing about Dalek that we have to keep in mind is that with Myriad, whenever the creature attacks, for each opponent other than the defending player, you're going to create a token that is tapped and attacking that player or planeswalker they control. Planeswalker doesn't really matter. We're going to exile the tokens at the end of combat. Now, admittedly, I had a poor understanding of Myriad when I first started working on this deck, and the thing that really excited me was playing cards like Fleshbag Marauder, Chained Slum Reaper, Demon's Disciple, attacking, having the tokens, and then sacrificing them so that you would basically get free edicts. Of course, that's not how it works. Exile the tokens at the end of combat means that we need to do some sort of funky stuff to leverage these tokens. But as I'm going to show you, none of this is hard for black to do. In fact, it's exactly what black wants to do based on the new cards we've had printed. So let's see how we leverage this. And the first, one of the more exciting means in which we can leverage these Myriad tokens is with Ninjutsu. And let's just do the math on it. Like a Dokuchi Shadowwalker is a 4-mana 5/5, but when we attack with a Dalek and we create a Myriad token, that Myriad token has menace, so it has evasion, and it basically has haste. So when we ninjutsu a Dokuchi Shadowwalker, we're going to deal 5 damage. It has haste, and it kind of has evasion, right? Because the Daleks are operating as a vehicle to deliver our ninjas into combat. Ninja of the Moo Moon hits for 6, basically not unblockable, but it's evasive. And then Okiba Gang Shinobi, of course, obliterating people's hands. When you see somebody get ahead and you want to take them down a notch, this is a great way to do it. So ninjas are one of those things that actually was kind of late in the process of developing this deck, because there were other things that initially came to mind when I was working on this that were not ninjutsu. But ninjutsu turns out to be a really, really powerful thing to do with our mana and with our Myriad tokens. But of course, we're in black. We have really, really insane and efficient card advantage in black, thanks to the essentially the focus that Wizards has had on printing powerful black card advantage that costs you some form of permanent. Of course, that began with Village Rites. We got a duplicate with Corrupted Conviction. It's been a slow burn because prior to that, we had like Costly Plunder, Altar's Reap, Merciless Resolve maybe. Basically, we had kind of like these sort of efficient draw spells, but there weren't a density of them enough to really reward you for playing a deck that had a lot of fodder in it, basically stuff that we're happy to sacrifice. And of course, something I wanted to mention too, something I forgot to mention about these, is that the way combat works is that we go to combat, we declare our attackers, they declare their blockers, we go to damage. After damage, there is another phase, and that is the end of combat phase. We can get our damage in, we can have our cake and eat it too, we can damage our opponents, and we can draw cards. So you go to combat, you hit your opponents with the Daleks, the one that's perhaps dying in combat, or the ones that are getting through. You just eat them up to these draw spells. And 1 mana draw twos, this is on the level of efficiency of Thoughtcast, right? Except that all we have to do is have our commander out. We don't have to have a ton of artifacts. So the metal, it's kind of like Metalcraft, right? Like these Village Rites Corrupted Conviction cards are well above the curve when it comes to efficiency of draw spells. So here's what we've got for the 1 mana territory. And I'm putting Deadly Dispute here because it does give you a treasure back. So it's essentially a 1 mana spell in some ways. The other ones that we get though, and we get a lot of them, are Costly Plunder. We have Fanatical Offering, the new card from Lost Caverns of Ixalan, Reckoner's Bargain. Do note that Reckoner's Bargain does actually check the mana value of the tokens, which is still 3. So this is a 2 mana, draw 2, gain 3 life. Altar's Reap is the worst of them, but it doesn't really even matter. Like 2 mana, draw 2 is busted. It's very good. And when you have a lot of these, they tend to chain into each other repeatedly. So we even play cards like Nasty End. Even though we don't have any legendary elements to this deck, it's still a draw 2 for 2 mana at instant speed. We have other ways to pay this off though, and that is Rowan's Grimsearch at 3 and Dig Up the Body. Rowan's Grimsearch is really close to Dig Through Time in Pauper, and let me tell you why. When you are digging for something that you really, really need, we can take the top 4 cards when we bargain and we can put them all into the graveyard, and then we can draw 2 and lose 2, which means 3 mana, sacrifice a Myriad token that was already going to get exiled, and we're going to draw 2 more after that, meaning we're going to dig 6 cards deep at instant speed for 3 mana at common. We also have Dig Up the Body, which is basically the same thing. We go 3 mana, cast this, casualty, copy goes on the stack. We mill 2, get a creature, mill 2, get a creature. And Dig Up the Body is, if you don't even have creatures in the graveyard, maybe you only have 1, you are very likely to put a second one in with that mill 4, right? So this operates in the same way as Rowan's Grimsearch, is we have basically a way to recover our creatures to our hand. This is kind of like draw 2 from our graveyard, but it's card selection because it's sending us so deep into our graveyard. And then the final one is Witch's Cauldron, which is busted in this deck. Witch's Cauldron is a little more expensive. It's 3 mana for your first activation. But when the game gets grindy, this card starts to really pay dividends, drawing an extra card every turn, a little bit of life, and it really fits into the curve nicely to just have a 2 mana draw 1 off of our Myriad tokens. And again, none of these cards that we just looked at cost anything in play that sets us back on permanence. They're really, really efficient. There's a lot of ways to synergize with these. And of course, the new one, and this is an evolution of Black Card Advantage, is Ichor Wellspring, Mycosynth Wellspring, Mephitic Draught, and Tithing Blade. And all of these are permanents that basically give us 2 cards for Mephitic Draught for the first 3, and then Tithing Blade is essentially doing the edict thing while leaving a permanent behind that we can sacrifice freely without much concern. The flip side of Tithing Blade is not something you're going to see very commonly because it's just not very fast. It's, every upkeep you drain everybody for 1. So, but it's like, the cherry on top. If you have nothing else to do with your mana, you can just flip the Tithing Blade, crafting with a creature in your graveyard, and you're good to go. So all of these things support that game plan. So if Dalek isn't in play, maybe it gets killed and you need to, get back into it, you draw one of these cards that allows you to sack one of these artifacts. You sack it, you get your land, you draw a bunch of cards, and you're back in the game. These represent massive sources of card advantage. And one of the other things to mention is that black card advantage used to look like Sign in Blood, Night's Whisper, Read the Bones, Pointed Discussion, Siphon Mind. And if you compare these to Siphon Mind, a card like Mephitic Draught is 2 mana, you draw a card, okay? And when we cast a Costly Plunder on it, if it was just the most basic of them, we're going to draw 1 more card when it goes, and then 2 more cards off the Costly Plunder. So we got a 4 mana draw 4, and we did it in 2 installments instead of 1. So we can run this out early and then sack it late to draw a ton of cards. Not to mention that cards like this do, as a side note, do a really amazing job of insulating us against cards like Fade Away, which is 2 and a blue. For each creature each player controls, they pay 1 colorless or sack a permanent. So just want to mention that as a little corner case of valuation of these. Now, of course, the next thing is that when we're doing all this sacrifice stuff and we just have good cards in our deck, like Gary, Grey Merchant of Asphodel, Vicious Battle Rager, Underdark Explorer, Chain Devil, these really, really powerful cards that we can reuse. These allow us to abuse the ETBs and continually generate value. And I've already seen how powerful this is because there's a ton of cards in our deck that just ETB and drain, right? And I had one game, I believe it was the first game I played with it, where somebody attacked me with a pretty massive Wilson, had first strike, and I blocked with my Vampire Spawn, Grave Flickered it. They had another creature that was going to be lethal, and the Grave Flickering of it with the first strike basically allowed me to survive at 1 life. And I narrowly lost that game, even though I was almost the first person to get killed, because I went to 1 life, and then there were a whole bunch of other problems at the table that person then had to deal with that didn't involve me. So I survived another 3 turns. Basically, like, these can be reach, they can help you survive, and of course they're just protection spells. You just cast this on your Dalek, when they go and they lightning bolt it, and it's a 1-for-1 trade that prevents them from getting our creature, and it comes back as a 4/4 menace, which is disgusting with these ones in particular. Supernatural Stamina also has the value of giving us a little bit more damage on the attack if we are just trying to get some more damage in. Now, Myriad goes even further, which is that it enables cards like Final Flourish, Candy Grapple, and there's another one called, it's not Victimize, it's Vicious Offering. Vicious Offering is a 2 mana instant, -2/-2. As a kicker, you can sack a creature to do -5/-5. And these cards are really good. -2/-2 kills a lot of combo creatures, most of them. -6/-6 and -5/-5 is a pretty massive debuff. And in a lot of cases, if it doesn't kill the creature, you'll be able to kill it with your blockers. So these spells are, in my opinion, I play these in a lot of my black decks, just as a 2 mana -2/-2, unconditionally. But the ability to sack something like a Mycosynth Wellspring, or if we do it at sorcery speed, we sack our Myriad tokens, and these become sort of like a sorcery speed 2 mana -6/-6 or -5/-5. And of course, because we're sacrificing all this stuff to our draw spells, to our kill spells, to our recursion, to our draining creatures, we also get Tragic Slip, which is a 1 mana -13/-13, which is great. These are low resource. They are instant speed occasionally, something like Candy Grapple more so than Final Flourish, and they deal with a lot of creatures. In fact, the -- as a category of removal is powerful against decks that run indestructible effects, right? Because we can get through indestructible. Now, the last thing I want to mention about Dalek before we go into looking at the deck is that Dalek is also an artifact creature. And because of that, we get to be one of the few decks I'm aware of that really loves a Glaze Fiend. Okay, Glaze Fiend. Glaze Fiend sees these Daleks come into play and he gets angry. He becomes a 4/5 flyer for 2 mana every time we attack. So you imagine that you go turn 2 Glaze Fiend, turn 3 Dalek, he immediately grows to a 2/3 attacker, you attack. And then turn 4 comes around, Dalek produces the Daleks. Maybe you cast another artifact. Maybe you cast like an Ichor Wellspring. Maybe you go Ichor Wellspring into Deadly Dispute. And this thing is going to be an 8-power creature. If you play 2 artifacts with a Dalek in play, this thing hits like a truck, which is super cool because this is just a potentially very powerful card that just hasn't had a lot of really good homes, and this is definitely one of the best ones. But of course, we would be remiss if we didn't mention the GOAT, the king, and that's Cranial Plating. This card is absolutely disgusting in Dalek. Not only does our commander have Menace, but we can swap it to the Myriad tokens. So we attach this to a Myriad token. Somebody has to block it, even though that creature is going to die, which kind of turns our Dalek into like the double abyss. And if they kill that creature on the stack, if we have the mana, we can swap it to another Dalek and just kill someone else. Pretty damn sick. And I'll tell you what, the last game that I played with this one, Cranial Plating was my finisher. It was in my opening hand. I held it the whole game, played it out on my Dalek at the final turn, and it allowed me to push lethal on a player who I'd only hit twice before with a Dalek. So they had 6 commander damage. I hit them for another 13 with Cranial Plating. This card is insane in this deck. And not to mention that Cranial Plating just goes on all of our other creatures. So Cranial Plating, we can attach it to a Basilicus creature, to an Okiba Reckoner raid that's flipped, to a Nocturnal Feeder, to an Underdark Explorer, to a Vicious Battle Rager. There's so many good targets for this in this deck. And y'all know that I love my Cranial Plating. I think this is just one of the best reasons, one of the good reasons to be in black. It's a built-in win condition that is very low cost. I mean, this is only 1 mana more than a Bone Splitter, and it is a lot more than a Bone Splitter. So this is the end of this section of the presentation here. But what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at the actual deck list itself. So let's take a look here. Called it the Terminator. We could also call it Dr. Death, I guess. There's a lot of fun ways we could kind of play with the name here. But let's take a look at what we've got. We have all of 20 creatures in the deck. It's not a huge number. It's not a small number. It's definitely like mid-moderate number of creatures for a black deck. Control is where you're starting to get into that like 17 creatures, maybe, 15 maybe. When we're going into, pure aggression, then generally we tend to have a little bit more. And this one doesn't have as many because we have so many other good things to be doing. So we've got the Okiba Reckoner Raid, the Serrated Scorpion. Another card that I forgot to mention too is Shadow Alley Denizen. This card is so sick. We give Intimidate every time a black creature enters the battlefield. So not only do we have our Daleks that are entering the battlefield and granting Intimidate to our Daleks, they're like literally like feeding themselves, but we also just have 20 creatures in the deck that we can play into this. This 1 mana 1/1 is going to help us push a lot of damage. Really, really powerful card. Amazing staple black aggro card. Also amazing in Passageway Seer too, where you can give the Seer basically unblockable. Intimidate is close to unblockable. For the purpose of aggression. I didn't get to mention a whole lot about Vermin Gorger, but whoa, this card is nuts. Vermin Gorger is going to hit for 6 the first time you activate it. It's going to hit for 12 the second time. Each time you sacrifice a Dalek after combat, you are pushing an 8-point life swing on the table. And what I've observed from these games that I've played is that I'm forcing everybody's life total down at a rate that is fast, but it's not such a cause for alarm that it is more scary than the other things happening at the table. And something that I like to talk to people about when it comes to cPDH in particular is that the dynamics are really, really different in cPDH than they are in Commander or in cEDH. And there are really great opportunities to be essentially not playing a worse commander or a worse deck. You're still playing a great deck, but you need to play the social game starting from your deck building process. And when you have a card like Loyal Subordinate, the delta on the card is going to be wider. You're going to have games where you play your Loyal Subordinate on one with a dark ritual, and you just run the table over, right? Like you just kill everybody. You're also going to have games where you run it out on turn 2, somebody edicts the board, somebody kills it, somebody counters it, and you don't play it again till like turn 6 because the deck doesn't have a ton of lands. Its mana is fast mana. It's not retained mana. It's not like arcane signets and Felwar stones and mind stones. And you can get stuck, right? And then you're kind of just a deck full of these, like, playing one card a turn, like an Etched Familiar, and then a Nocturnal Feeder, and then, stuff like that. Also, your card advantage in Loyal Apprentice is nowhere near this caliber. You can play these cards, but they all come at the cost of your board presence in a way that Dalek does not. We get to keep it all. Like, this is like having your cake and eating it too in a massive way. And we are playing 10 1, 2, or 3 mana draw 2s. The 3 mana ones, the 2 of them, dig very deep. So they're really good card selection. And if we add in the Mycosynth Wellspring, the Mephitic Draught, the Ichor Wellspring, those types of cards, there's one more that I'm missing here. We've got the Mycosynth, the Mephitic. Gotta go back to there's another 4 or 2 mana draw spell as well. Which one was that? Oh yeah, the Tithing Blade. Not a draw spell, but still, just another thing we can sacrifice. There's also Nihil Spellbomb, which is, again, just another really great thing to be playing in these decks, where if you need to, you can just draw 3 cards, paying that extra black mana, and just get further into your deck. If you're not actually concerned about dying to something graveyard related, or if you're really stuck, then, if you don't hit your 3rd land drop, or I guess if you don't hit your 4th land drop, then you can always, Nihil Spellbomb, sack Nihil Spellbomb, pay the 1 to a Costly Plunder, and draw 3 cards. You're going to hit it, right? So there's just a lot of gas in this deck, a lot of staying power to push through to the game. So the second game I played, my commander was killed on turn 4, and with something I couldn't protect it from. It was a crib swap. And not only did I take their 1/1 creature and turn it into a Dokuchi Shadow Walker, which felt awesome. I've also got the wrong art here. There's only one good art of this card. But I was able to just continually draw cards. Like I had interaction, I had card draw, and I grinded really well. It felt really, really fantastic to basically be like, yeah, my commander died. I can still do things with my mana. I can still push damage on people. Of course, like any good black sort of mid-range-ish deck, I would say this is definitely a proactive mid-range deck. It's an aggressive deck in the sense that it's all about attacking, but it has a ton of resource advantage. It has protection. We have plenty of removal. We have plenty of wraths. So we have a lot of way to interact on the stack. But we have our Vicious Battle Rager. We have our Gary, which I just don't think doesn't go in very many decks. I think I'd love to see somebody show me a Grey Merchant of Asphodel, a deck that didn't want this card in it. Oh, what's up? This stream is Dootin. Is this an Eli or a Brian? Dota Clips. It's one of you two. I know it's you, Eli, or Brian, one of you. it's Dootin'. But yeah, we've got basically Grey Merchant of Afsidel is going to be a powerful closer for our deck that we can Grave Flicker with Feign Death, Not Dead After All, Professor's Warning, Supernatural Stamina. Thumbs up for the knowledge. You betcha. Of course. Hope you're enjoying it. We also have our Underdark Explorer. And then Troll of Khazad-dûm, which gives us a way to, occasionally we're just going to cast this as a 6-mana threat and beat people up with it. But it's a really interesting deck in basically the fact that we have like fast mana to deploy a lot of stuff really quickly. Like Dark Ritual opens up lines where you go like turn 2 Vicious Battle Rager. There is even a turn 1 line. If you have Lotus Petal, Dark Ritual, Swamp, you can turn 1 a Vicious Battle Rager in this deck, or turn 2 an Underdark Explorer, or turn 2 a Vicious Battle Rager. So it opens up some really powerful lines that we can use to be very proactive in a game, while still ultimately being a mid-range deck that isn't ending the game on the spot with our degenerate fast mana stuff. And I think that that's really interesting. It causes a lot of cognitive dissonance for the table when there's a combo player deploying their combo pieces, and then there's a mid-range player doing like initiative things. Initiative is obviously very powerful, and it tends to snowball, but it is nowhere near the win condition that a combo player presents when they kill the whole table all at once. And so even if we do Dark Ritual, into a Vicious Battle Rager on turn 2 or 1, there's a good chance that that we're still not the actual threat, and that's just good game theory. Something you're going to see here too that Lawbert will love to see is that we are actually playing some indestructible spells. We have Armor of Shadows, which is great. It's giving us an additional power. It's also giving us indestructible. They're 1 mana. This helps us keep our action economy really high. And indestructible is pretty important because we're all about the combat step. To get all of our value from our Myriad creatures, we need to be able to attack. And so Armor of Shadows is an important part of that. We also have Professor's Warning, which is, which has other applications. There's always the possibility that somebody goes to sweep the board for 3, and we just put a counter on our Dalek, right? And then it doesn't die. But it also gives indestructible. I shaved on Undying Evil to achieve this balance of 4 Grave Flickers and then 2 Armor of Shadow, Professor's Warning. There may be a Worlds 2 where if we got more 1-mana indestructible spells that we would lean a little bit further into that, just because of the need to go to combat, right? It's turning on our ninjas, it's turning on our draw spells, it's turning on our removal spells. There's some other cool stuff I want to show you guys about this deck, and that is Thieves' Tools. This is a 2-mana mana rock, basically, right? It's making a treasure. It's not fixing our mana, but it is kind of like an Arcane Signet the first time you cast it. And then once you equip it, it's giving unblockable to our Dalek. Our primary Dalek is the one we're really most concerned about, right? And so this is a great tool for a deck like this because it's both achieving the effect of granting our evasion, but it's also giving us a treasure. Another card that I've been considering for this deck, and this deck is refined, but there's always room for improvement. And one of the cards that is also a potential include in this deck is going to be in here. There's actually a number of them. And one of those is a 2-mana card similar to Thieves' Tools that grants us flying. Gilded Pinions. And this is a card I've played in Passageway Seer, where it's giving us a treasure on turn 2, allowing us to play a turn 3 Passageway Seer. Gilded Pinions is coming down, it's giving us a treasure, and then it's granting us flying for the rest of the game. And flying is really, really good. So this is a card that may make its way into the deck at some point. One of the questions that I'm asking kind of myself with this is, what additional tools do we need to make sure that the Dalek can continually attack every single time so that we can continue to draw cards, kill things, and just put damage on the table. And so there may come a time when Gilded Pinions comes in as well and joins Thieves' Tools. Another thing that Gilded Pinions does that I would have loved in the last game I played with this is granting flying to something like Okiba Reckoner Raid or Okiba Gang Shinobi. Right. There's other stuff you can give flying to, of course, too. You just attach it to a vampire spawn and it allows you to attack every turn. But really, the Okiba Gang Shinobi is is going to mess somebody's day up really bad, or it's going to force them to remove it, which either way, it probably got 3 cards, right? 2 cards discarded, 1 card for their removal. So it's kind of a 3-for-1 in that way. Yeah. The other card I'll be looking at maybe is Unearth. I don't usually like playing Unearth to get my commander back, but because if it gets countered, then your commander is stuck there until you get another recursion spell, and I think that's pretty bad. But Unearth is just 1 mana. If people, it's just a quick way to get our commander back that's like pretty low cost. So I think we're going to move that one to the sideboard. There's also cards like Gixian Infiltrator that we could consider as well. Unfortunately, we don't sacrifice the Myriad tokens to themselves. They have to be sacrificed to something else. It'd be a shame if we didn't have like a zillion ways to do that, but this may not be as consistent as we want it to be. Another card that is probably quite good here is, of course, Gurmag Angler. And the reason for that, and just for some context, Gurmag Angler is obviously like a powerful card. Let's go find it here. Where are you at, Gurmy? Yeah, obviously like powerful potential here. 7 mana for a 5/5 with Delve. So of course we pay 1 black mana for this. It's not a 7 mana card. It is frequently a 7 mana card when it is in your opener and you don't have a deck that churns very rapidly. If you're just playing like a mid-range or control deck, like having this in your opening hand sucks. Especially because black likes to do a lot of recursion with its graveyard. So the stuff that's in there sometimes is good to eat and sometimes it's bad to eat. We don't want to eat our creatures. We want to reanimate them. We want to recur them. That's a powerful part of black's card advantage. And so Gurmag Angler actually does work really well here, I think, because we have a lot of action economy. We have a lot of cheap spells that we're deploying every turn. We're filling our graveyard by sacrificing things. And there's really only 3 ways to get things back in the deck, and that's dig up the body, Witch's Cottage, and Mortuary Mire, paired with, of course, Troll of Khazad-dûm, which can find the Witch's Cottage. So 4 ways to get things back. So generally, if it's in our graveyard, we're fine leaving it be. Another card that is kind of a pet card of mine, and I've put it into a lot of decks and taken it out of a lot of decks, just out of diligence, is Ecstatic Awakener. Ecstatic Awakener is 1 black for a 1/1 human wizard. It has the most metal flavor text of any Magic card. That might be a broad statement. It's my favorite flavor text of any Magic card. And that is, Great Ormondal, I kneel before you, a fragment of your will, servant of your tyranny. I beg you, release the strength within me. And here it is. Bones cracked, flesh split apart, and the screams of euphoric agony gave way to unholy laughter. So sick. So this card is also pretty dang good. Ecstatic Awakener is a 1 mana 1/1, so we can play it really early. 3 mana, we can sacrifice another creature, so a Myriad token, because it doesn't say sorcery speed, it just says activate only once per turn. Sack a creature, draw a card, then transform it, and then it becomes a 4/4. So it's kind of like 2 installments on a 4/4 for 4 mana that draws us a card, which I think is reasonable. It's a little bit more mana than we would generally like to spend, but it comes with a threat. And it's a good threat. It's a 4/4, so I do like that one as well. That's a great card. Other cards like Fungal Fortitude is one that I've been thinking about a little bit as well. And I'm just giving you all some insight onto some other cards that kind of fit into this really well. Fungal Fortitude is a great new spell from Ixalan. It gives us power. It's got flash, so it is a protection spell. It's a gray flicker, but when we just want to play it on our creature, it's going to sit there and protect our creature until the creature dies, right? Or maybe somebody bounces it or something like that. But in the meantime, it's granting us power, which is pretty dang cool. So I do like this. It's a card that you could easily play out proactively, right? You just play it out. Everybody's tapped out early on. You play it out on your Dalek Squadron, and you get extra power. And then you're kind of insulated against removal, edicts, things like that. There's also Vicious Offering. This is kind of where you get into that like synergy versus good cards. Vicious Offering has a higher ceiling on it than something like Grasp of Darkness, right? Grasp of Darkness works as a -4/-4 anytime, right? For 2 mana for the same amount. Vicious Offering is -2/-2 at instant speed, mostly. You could there are creatures you could sacrifice, which is fine. Doesn't sack artifacts though. Or sorcery speed, we sacrifice a Dalek to get a little bit more, -5/-5. I'm totally fine playing removal at sorcery speed. I think that that's generally what I prefer to do. Our removal, we want our removal to accomplish something, and that is killing the creature that we want dead. And so sorcery speed removal for me is my preference because, for example, if I cast my sorcery speed removal and there's other players ahead of me before the player that I'm killing the creature on, if that creature is really a problem, other people are going to spend their turns doing something similar. So if I've got another player ahead of me and I suspect that they may have a way to remove that creature, I'll go first, right? Use its sorcery speed, -5/-5. If it doesn't work, they grant it some form of protection, then the player next to me can deal with it or try to deal with it. And so Vicious Offering is kind of like synergy versus good cards. I've chosen to play Grasp of Darkness instead. So we have the basics like Victim of Night, Grasp of Darkness, Go for the Throat. We also do play Feed the Swarm in here, even though we have sort of like protection for our Dalek with these like cheap sacrifices. The reality is that a lot of these we want to just cast during our turn. They're kind of functionally, they are instant speed, but the way we deploy them is usually sorcery speed. So they don't act as much as protection, and none of these protect us against auras. So like an Impetus card, although Impetus wouldn't necessarily be such a bad thing because we're still myriading, every turn that we attack. An Impetus on us is great for us, actually, in some ways. We do play Echoing Decay. This is a staple black spell. It hits all soldier tokens, which includes Abdel and TPI. If you hit an Abdel token while there's a TPI tokens in play, it's going to kill all of them because they have the same name. They're all soldiers, even though they're different colors and different types and stuff, they're the same name. We just have good old-fashioned Doomblade. Doomblade's ready. And then, of course, Tragic Slip, Defile, Spinning Darkness. If you're not playing this in your mono black decks, you better have a damn good reason for it. This card not only saved my bacon as a top deck because I was at 1 and I needed to crack my Pestilence and I needed to do other things, but it's just an instant speed free Lightning Helix. It's sick. This card is, and it's annoying. You have to track your graveyard order, but like, I don't know. Just do it, right? Like, play the good card. Play the good card. And Snuff Out, of course. Another card we could be playing in here as well is just something like Astrolabe, but I just really don't feel like drawing cards is something we need even more of in the deck, right? And it's not really fixing our mana either. It's just a 1 mana draw card on ETB, and then we get fodder later on. I wouldn't blame somebody for playing it, but there's just a lot of other cards that I want in here that I still don't have room for. Another one is that's kind of been in and out of the list is Crypt Rats. Crypt Rats is obviously just like an amazing black card. It is a great black sweeper. Play this, crack it, sweep the board. Being able to recur it over and over again is great with Witch's Cottage or Dig Up the Body. It's a great finisher. It can stabilize the board. It's insane off Throne of the Dead 3. If you manage to get to Throne of the Dead 3 in the initiative, the final stage of the dungeon, and you flip a Crypt Rats into play, I have never lost a game that I've flipped a Crypt Rats into play off of Throne of the Dead 3. If you do, you're going to have a 4/4 Crypt Rats that is hexproof until the beginning of your next turn. You did that on upkeep, probably, or in combat, which means you have your second main, and then you just repeatedly wipe the table of stuff. You're just going to clear the table over and over again, and then you untap, and maybe they kill it, but it's like it just destroyed everybody. And if it doesn't die, they're just super dead. This is a really strong card. So I don't have it in the deck because it is still mana intensive, and this deck does like to keep its action economy quite high. Another reason to run Crypt Rats as well is you can sink X black mana into it once, so maybe you do 3, and then you pop one of these, right? And because it's one instance of 3 damage, it kills the Crypt Rats, and then it's going to come back again, which is pretty cool if you have any interest in like locking down the initiative or repeatedly clearing somebody's board of stuff. Another card I wanted to mention, there's actually a bunch of these, is Seal of Doom. And this isn't so much for this deck, although it could, but it's for other black decks. I think that this card is wildly underplayed right now. It's a little tough because there's a lot of good 2 mana, 1 mana, 0 mana black removal. So you do sort of get into this territory of like, why do I need to play this 3 mana removal spell that is conditional for only non-black creatures? And the reason is that this just sits there. It is a free activation. And I'm going to go so far as to say that Seal of Doom is probably better than Executioner's Capsule, which you'll notice I don't have in this deck. Tragic Slip went in for Executioner's Capsule. And part of that is because Executioner's Capsule is, it's kind of like Honored Heirloom. Many of you have probably discovered that Honored Heirloom is indeed a powerful sort of repeatable graveyard hate effect. And when it works, it's really like oppressive. But what it also reads is I need to hold up 3 mana all the time. It's like a 3 mana tax on every turn where somebody is doing something that you suspect is graveyard oriented and is a problem. And Executioner's Capsule is basically the same way. It's only 2, which is not that bad, but I just found myself not really liking this card in this particular deck. I think it's a good one in a lot of other decks, but I think that if you're playing this, you also want to consider playing a card like Seal of Doom, which is free to activate. So you invest early, and then later on it's just sitting there. You can use it whenever you want. Jonathan asks, quick question, why not just Loyal Subordinate over Dalek? That's a great question. And actually, if you want to hear my initial answer to that, I did answer that actually at the beginning of the video and also at the beginning of the deck build. So I'll make sure to put in some timestamps, but I'm happy to answer it again here too. So Loyal Subordinate is obviously clearly powerful. And let's bring up Loyal Subordinate on the screen here. Let's see if I can find my own Loyal Sub deck. Oh, I guess I don't have one here, but we'll pull it up. Popper, we'll go to PDH here. Loyal Subordinate. Okay. So Loyal Subordinate here is a 3 mana, 3/1 menace for those of you who are unfamiliar with it. And every time you go to combat, it is a zombie too, worth mentioning. Every time you go to combat, beginning of combat on your turn, if you control your commander, each opponent loses 3 life. So Loyal Subordinate, far more aggressive than Dalek Squadron. Not to say that Loyal Subordinate couldn't be built in a mid-range capacity. I've actually been thinking that a little bit lately, because commanders like this that just like all you need to have is your commander, then all I want to do is have the mana to cast my commander, right? Like Loyal Subordinate feels like the best thing to do in this whole deck every single time you play it. So a lot of builds don't play really any mana rocks, and I kind of wonder if they should. You know, Obstinate, the winner of the Common Cause tournament that Chris from One More Games MTG ran, won the tournament with Loyal Apprentice, which is kind of the same energy, right? Like you just want to play your commander out over and over and over again. So the reason we play Dalek over Loyal Subordinate, and it's not really an either or, they're both great choices, is that Loyal Subordinate is just a good card. Dalek makes everything that you do in your 99 disgusting. So Loyal Subordinate does play like Village Rites, Deadly Dispute, Corrupted Conviction. You do play the ETB and the LTB and Death Trigger Drain creatures. You do play fast mana, right? And so it's just a different approach, right? Like Loyal Subordinate's going to give you all this damage. One of the problems with Loyal Subordinate that I've seen playing against it is that it gasses out. This is a powerful commander, but it is a 3/1. It dies to everything that isn't non-black related, right? And I think that, you know, personally for me, I don't really like that. I don't know. I've blown out Loyal Subordinate players by just killing their commander after they Dark Ritual it. And if you do that, they may not play their commander ever again. Like, you have to confront that reality when you play Loyal Subordinate. And Loyal Subordinate demands to be killed. So not only is it something that demands to be killed because it's ending the game, but it dies to everything. And I think that that combination, for me personally, is just not my favorite. I still think it's a great deck. Like, this deck has been putting up results. Whereas my Dalek deck, doesn't have nearly as many games played with it, right? So the traditional Loyal Subordinate builds are good. And I just think that I prefer, personally for me, I prefer the Dalek because as we've discussed before, the Dalek is enabling all of the best things that Black offers us. It's giving us amazing card draw. It's giving us amazing removal. It's giving us great pressure. It's an artifact that's feeding cranial plating in really busted ways. And everything synergizes really well together. So yeah, Loyal Subordinate, I guess, would be like the Black aggro good stuff. And Dalek is like Black proactive mid-range synergy. There's more synergy. The idea of being able to use the Village Rights effect and so on more consistently is very nice. Yeah, and just to give you some examples of what that looks like, I have 2 games here. One that I won on turn 12 from yesterday and one on turn 11. And in the first game that I won on turn 12, that one had a Wilson Far Traveler piloted by a Resident Hive Cryptid, Abdel Sailor, Sword Coast Sailor piloted by Lawbert, and a Siverus Cloakwood Hermit. I was in position 1, and I drew 10 cards off of 5 draw spells in really short order. They were like way up at the top of my graveyard, like some of the first ones that I cast. And you can chain these together, like turn 3 Dalek, turn 4 go Costly Plunder, Deadly Dispute, hold up 1 mana for Defile. Really high action economy, a lot of resources. So it's kind of funny because our commander is aggressive. It's not as aggressive as or it's not as fast. It is as aggressive, but it's not as fast as a Loyal Subordinate. But we still play the same fast mana aside from Blood Pet. And that's because my Dark Ritual is turning on my value engine, whereas playing a Loyal Subordinate is turning on your pressure right away, like just big pressure. So yeah, they're kind of, apples to apples in a lot of ways, but this draw suite here is just crazy. I mean, I don't know. I have a lot of black decks. I love playing mono black, and not a lot of them get to play this much, right? There's just a lot. It's really, really good. And even Witch's Cauldron, it's nowhere near as good in any other deck I've played than this one. This is probably the best Witch's Cauldron deck I've got. Just getting free creatures every single turn. This is sick. Sometimes with cards, sometimes when you're building around these effects, you have to include other cards like Persistent Specimen, Clay Revenant, other cards like that. But, again, just want to reiterate that I don't think it's an either or. I think that Loyal Subordinate is still a great deck, and it's put up great results. If you're at a pod where it's not very interactive, you don't even need to attack with Loyal Subordinate, right? It just sits there over and over and over again. So it's a great deck. And it's doing the same thing with all these drain creatures. It goes a little bit deeper. It plays Soul Cage Fiend, which I would like to have in this deck too. But you got to make room for stuff somehow. And that one didn't make the cut. Another card too that I'd love to see the Loyal Subordinate players playing, as well as one that I'd love to play here, is Blood Tithe, which is a miniature Gary. It's actually it's cheaper. It deals 9 damage, so it's 10% of the opponent's life total for 4 mana, and it's also gaining us 9 life, which is pretty darn cool. Little mini Gary there. Another card too that I want to put on people's radar that I think a lot of people know about, but doesn't really see a lot of play. And I think Gretchen might be the reason, but I don't know if Gretchen alone is a reason not to play this card. And that's Death Rattle. Not only does it have like very sick artwork, Just like a little flavor win here. This dude just hopelessly battling off these undead serpents that are biting at him. It's just very cool. Plus the future sight border is pretty sweet too. But yeah, 1 mana delve, like destroy a non-green creature. It can't be regenerated. Can't be regenerated is relevant. So it's another card I'm considering as well. And look, I'm not even playing Sign in Blood and Night's Whisper. If someone wanted even more card advantage, they could put those 2 cards in here, right? There's nothing wrong with them. We gain enough life that it doesn't really put us back. There's other ninjas we could play as well. And maybe the ninjas are just like... maybe the ninjas are just so free that we definitely want them. But the only ones we don't have, like Azra Smoke Shaper is another one I've been considering too. Allows us to attack in regardless of whether our Dalek is going. It can we can attack into somebody who will win in combat by ninjutsuing one of our creatures. We get a 3/3 for 2 mana with haste, and we get indestructible on our commander. So I've thought about this one. Thought about Mokutai Ambusher. I think in general the drain creatures end up being more efficient when it comes to damage dealers, because they immediately resolve that damage, right? Like even this one, it hits for 3 on the first hit, and if you cast a vampire spawn, right, it's 1 more mana, but it's an 8-point life total differential, and we get a creature. So it's just immediate, which is cool. So and these drain cards, by the way, have just been winning games for me. They're really quite strong. So with that said here, if anybody has any other questions, I'm happy to answer that. We'll give a little bit of time for folks to bring those up. I can talk about a couple other cards that I've been looking at too. There's also Vendetta, which I've been playing in some of my decks. It's a little scary. You want the ability to unconditionally kill a creature, but you don't really want to pay like 8 life to do it. Like a Wilson, or I don't know, like a Dargo, taking 5. Not that cool, not that great. But, it's an option. This deck could also play Ashes to Ashes if it was really concerned about clearing blockers. And I think that there is a rationale where maybe you play this deck with slightly less targeted removal and you play more edicts because you're like clearing blockers out of the way for your menace. I think that could also be reasonable. But usually there's one player who you can attack, right? And you can hit them and not lose your commander in that way. We also had Nefarious Imp in the deck at one point as well. Just a 3 mana 2/1 flyer. Whenever 1 or more permanents leave the battlefield, you scry 1. And this card, it's the reason it's not in the deck is because it is, I don't know, it's quite sweet. You go, attack with Dalek, sacrifice something to costly plunder, scry 1, draw 2, and then maybe you go Candy Grapple, scry 1 again, sack something, or you go Deadly Dispute, scry 1 again. So if you do them in instances, like separate instances, you're gonna basically get multiple scries out of it. And the fact that it flies means it can push damage. It also carries a cranial plating well, but ultimately, like, this doesn't draw a card. It doesn't do that much damage on its own. I mean, it can poke for damage for sure, but I think it's a reasonable card to play as well. And then the other thing that I'm kind of looking at as well is like, would I rather be able to run the Dalek out over and over and over again, or do I want to run it out fast? And because Dalek is an important part of the game plan, there might be a world where we just maybe don't run Lotus Petal or Cabal Ritual, and instead run like 2 mana Rocks. And then we just have that one card in our deck, the Dark Ritual, where when we draw it in our opening hand, we do Busted Things. That's also maybe reasonable. Because these are bad top decks. Lotus Petal, Dark Ritual, Cabal Ritual, they don't, when you top deck them, they don't feel great. Sometimes they still feel good, right? They allow you to do more with your turn, a big burst of mana. But Alex says, "Hey cutie, didn't know you were streaming today." Yeah. Yesterday I was on Lawbert's stream, which was great, over on Twitch, and decided to do that for my streaming for that day. But promised to myself that I would stream today as well, just to make sure that we keep up on that at least once weekly. But my goal for 2024 is to be streaming twice weekly, one day for gameplay, one day for deck building, because I just haven't been able to get enough Magic in lately. Got to keep the stoke high on the Magic cards. Other cards. Other cards are on the short list, and actually, I'm going to take a couple of these cards and put them in the considering, so that we can really get a look at like the premium cards that I want to be finding room for, and move the other ones into considering. Blessing of Leeches is great. I don't think Haunted Cloak is going to make the cut, although it's very good. Vicious Offering, probably not. Unearth, yes. Sign in Blood, yes. Shred Memory, no, because we don't... Cranial Plating is a funny card in that, like, I don't want to run out of Cranial Plating if I'm not going to end the game with it. That's kind of my attitude on it. Or if I'm in a commanding position, then I'll run it out, knowing that I can survive and then kill people with it. But it's just so good in this deck. You produce 3 artifacts every turn with Dalek. I mean, the last time I played, if for y'all that weren't there at the beginning of the presentation, the beginning of the stream, the last game that I played was a turn 11 win with Dalek, and it was off of a Cranial Plating. I hit somebody for 13 with a Dalek and a Cranial Plating, and it was sweet. I do love a good Cranial Plating. I think Mokutai Ambusher also probably not likely to get in the deck. Fake Your Own Death is pretty cool in decks where you can do something with a permanent, and we can do something with a permanent here, but we have that already. Like, our Myriad is plenty of fodder. So I think that the 2 mana part of this is what kind of detracts us. Dothy Slayer and Dothy Horror. And by proxy of talking about them, we also talk about Tormented Soul and Changeling Outcast. I used to be pretty high on these cards. I considered them to be an integral part of black aggro because they work really, really well with the Initiative and the Monarch. They're great with Cranial Plating. They're great with the Forge, with the Initiative. And they just can't be blocked. So they keep the tempo high, which is good. They are not as efficient as the ETB Drain. If you play a turn 1 Changeling Outcast, turn 2 you hit for 1, turn 3 you hit for 1, and then you play a Vampire Spawn, you have hit for 2 damage with your 1 mana card, or you can hit for an 8-point life swing on a 3 mana card. And I think that these also don't block, right? Whereas the Vampire Spawn, the Arrogant Outlaw, the Etched Familiar, all these cards, they attack and they block. So I just think that they're actually quite a bit better. They also help maximize cards like Unearth, which is sweet. So I love these cards. I have a foil Dothy Slayer Judge promo. I'll show you what it looks like because it's very cool. Is the Arena League? Yeah, this is the one I've got. I love Dothy Slayer, and of course the double black pip is good, but they're not as high value or as aggressive. So we're gonna cut these ones out of here because they're really not part of the picture. Same thing with Changeling Outcast. And with our Tormented Soul, I also have the DCI promo of that. Professor's Warning is already in the deck. Undying Evil could be in the deck. Greedy Freebooter, not going to be in the deck. Ghastly Demise could be. Carrion Feeder is another one that might look really good, but we have a lot of things to do with those creatures that involve killing our opponent's creatures or drawing cards. And this one here, you play it on turn 1, maybe turn 2 or turn 3, you play a Dalek. And then, the first time it swings, it becomes a 3/3. It's just like not that great, especially if we'd rather just be drawing cards. Blood Fountain is a good card. I think it's, fine to play in this deck, but Pete Bog is another one that we see Loyal Subordinate players playing, and I could play this card for another way to produce a turn 2 Dalek, but I'm a little too conservative to play a land that blows itself up. I think Pete Bog like puts a target on your back for opportunism. You like run out your commander with a Pete Bog, and then everybody knows that after you've used it once, you can only use it once again before losing that land. And if you don't have lands to replace it, you are so far behind. So far behind. Not only are you one land behind, but you have to draw all the lands to play it again. So I just don't think Pete Bog is like a part of the deck that I like here. I think Vendetta also probably goes. We just have better removal than Vendetta. Night's Whisperer, these are good. Demon's Disciples, fine. Soul Cage Fiend, Blood Tithe. Blood Tithe is a great card. I don't think it necessarily is right for this deck. We have lots of other stuff. Whisper Silk Cloak, also a great card, but 5 mana. It's a lot. We have other things we want to do with our mana. So this is more like what we're looking for. What are the other ones? There's, yeah, that's more like what we're looking for. So. Yeah, like Relic could go in here too, if you were concerned about that kind of thing. If we were looking at OTAG ramp, MV equals 2, we're probably looking at like Mind Stone. You know, if we were to swap out our Cabal Ritual and our Lotus Petal, for example. Flywheel Racer, another one that can kind of act that way. We'd have Gilded Pinions, which definitely kind of fits the bill in that way. Guardian Idol, another good one that could be played there, or Mind Stone. Either of those are good. Ornithopter of Paradise works great with cranial plating, but we have better targets for cranial plating, and I don't like that this gets swept up in a 2-mana sweeper. I don't like putting myself behind on my sweepers. It's a shame that Myriad doesn't give you the creature forever, because cards like Priest of Yawgmoth and Soldevi Adnate would be disgusting in this deck. That was how I had it originally built before I learned the error of my ways. So I think those are kind of other ones you could look at. Prize Statue is another one that might be interesting, like turn 2 Prize Statue. I don't know. Prize Statue is more for a deck that, like, it's better for gut. This is a much better gut card than it is a Dalek card, because Dalek doesn't actually do anything with this. It's just like another kind of weird ramp piece, fodder piece. We have the fodder, right? The other ones I want to mention too are Cloak of the Bat, which is a 2-mana flying and haste, equip for 2, and then Fleet Feather Sandals, which is functionally the same card. And I think that this kind of a card, the concern I have around it is like, when do I want haste? I want it when I'm replaying my commander. Am I going to have 2 mana and the cost of my commander to do this? It's kind of like adding 2 to the command tax. So I think that these probably don't make the cut, because if it's like you're playing your Dalek for the second time, it's 5 mana, and then you want 2 to give it haste and flying. Maybe we would better be served by something like type equipment. Let's just do flying and see what we get, because we're looking for a 1-mana equip for flying, something like Cobbled Wings maybe, because the purpose of this is evasion. Yeah, not much. There's like Wings of Hubris, gives it unblockable 1 time if you need it. But Gilded Pinions is really where we want to be. It's progressing us on mana. It's making a second permanent. It is 2 to equip, but that's okay, because we're not looking for we're not necessarily getting the haste part of it here. That is definitely a difference between this and Loyal Subordinate too, is that when you replay Loyal Subordinate, it just like has haste, right? It's pinging everybody right then and there for 10% of the table's life total. So yeah, Gilded Pinions is probably where we want to be. There might be something like type Aura O O Fear or O Intimidate that we could use. Auras, though, you know, they come and go. When our commander goes, so does the aura. So not something I love, although Predator's Gambit's pretty cool. Has Intimidate as long as the controller creates no other creatures. That does not actually work because we have 3 creatures every time we attack. Something like, yeah, see, none of these are super appealing. Gruesome Deformity would be just 1 mana. It's an option because it is important that our commander be able to punch through every time. What would be another one? Flying O Shadow type aura. Yep. So Dragon Shadow would be +1/+0 Fear. It really wouldn't ever come back because we only have 1 creature that is 6 mana value, and that is our Troll of Khazad-dûm. So, be that as it may. I guess we could also look at what's the new. Got the new set coming out, and there's probably some interesting cards there to look at. Murderer at Karlov Manor. And we have a new black card that we will probably be playing in this deck. Almost certainly we'll be playing in this deck. And that is... yes, Extract a Confession. This one right here. This is a new edict that is likely to become staple in black. 2 mana, sorcery speed. Each opponent sacks a creature. If you collect evidence by exiling cards with total mana value 6 or greater from your graveyard, which is really a low cost. Might be like 2 spells, maybe 1 even in some cases if you have like cyclers, in your deck. Something like a Troll of Khazad-dûm could meet this requirement. And if you do, each opponent sacks a creature with the greatest power, which is really good. This helps you get around things like Abdel, where you want to kill the Abdel but not the tokens, or where you want to kill, even like an edict against like a gut player where you'd rather have the gut tokens die than something else. Or there's a lot of different opportunities for this. For against Voltron, it's going to be super strong. 2 mana, get 3 cards from your opponent is really good. So yeah, that one's coming. And let's see, what's the set code here? MKM. We can take a look at MKM. Sanitation Automation. Enters the battlefield, surveil 1. Let all the colorless stands out there know that they have another way to dig into their deck with this card. We have Public Thoroughfare, which, not very good. But yeah, these are the ones we've got so far from that. So anywho, this is the deck. Pretty stoked on it. This would definitely be like a high choice for me in a league or a tournament right now. Somewhere between this, Third Path Iconoclast, Rakdos Gut. Gut Agent of the Iron Throne is another deck that has just gotten absolutely just juiced with cards like Fanatical Offering, Mephitic Draught, Tithing Blade, maybe even Witch's Cauldron, who knows. It's just really loves all that stuff. So that's another good one that I've kind of been thinking about too. But yeah, I'll definitely be playing black in whatever competitive event I come to, and we'll be figuring out the balance with cards like Gurmag Angler and maybe the Death Rattle. I'll probably have to pick just 1 Delve card. There's also like Culling the Weak. You can use on your Dalek tokens, make 4 mana. Do a bunch of stuff. Yeah, things like that. So with that all said, hope you all enjoyed the breakdown on Dalek Squadron here today. If you're interested in looking at the list here, I'm going to leave it in the description below as well as in the description for the video. You can go take a look at it there and follow my Mox field if you're interested in more updates about the deck. Of course, if you want to be up to date on all the updates that I make to all the decks that we make here on Let's Build through the Common Connoisseurs, you can find ways to support here through Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/Common Connoisseurs, which is in the description below, there are ways cheap as $2 a month to support me and the content that we're making here, spreading the good word about PDH and cPDH, bringing in great deck builders from across the format, from across all the different servers there are for this, and trying to introduce you all to new ways to build your deck. So if you want to support that, it'll gain you entrance into the supporters only section of the Common Connoisseurs Discord, which last I checked has almost, what is it, 715, 716 people in it. It's a massive server. I'm kind of blown away by it at times that it's grown so large. But yeah, it's a great place to follow the content. Every time I make a change to my decks that we build on Let's Build, we have a very well organized, very well presented section for deck lists where I will ping everybody, let you know what I've added and what I've cut, and give you updates like that. Also gets you early access to certain forms of content, although a lot of my content lately has been mainly through these live streams. It also gets you access to the conversations we have with the deck builders that we bring on before the show. So great ways to support there. So take a look at that. But of course, the basic thing that you can do to support the content and support me financially is actually free for you. And that is just to like the video when you're done, comment if you want to support the algorithm, and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. You can also go to the page, and when I've posted live streams ahead of time, you can go in there and click waiting or notify me, and it'll actually ping you when the video comes up, so you never miss one of these live streams. So with that said, Connoisseurs of Fine Common Cardboard, thank you so much for being here. Wherever you are in the multiverse, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you on the battlefield. Peace out, friends.